From gorillas in the Democratic Republic of Congo to herons in Chesapeake Bay and falcons in downtown Baltimore. From the polar bears and beluga whales of Hudson Bay to manatee-filled freshwater springs in Florida. From bald eagle and condor nests perched above the Pacific to an Alaskan river filled with brown bears and salmon. As the world's largest live nature cam network, Explore.org hosts cameras that stream footage from many areas across the planet. Installing and maintaining the cams and getting their feeds online is challenging, especially when the cameras broadcast from remote locations, such as Brooks River in Katmai National Park, Alaska. Hello, everyone. This is Mike Fitz, your resident naturalist with Explore.org. Today, we're talking about the tech of the bear cams and attempting to answer the question, how do they work? My guests are Candice Rusch, Explore.org's Director of New Media, and Joe Pifer, the Field Operations Manager for Explore.org. They're part of the small yet dedicated team working behind the scenes to make the Bearcam and the other webcams on Explore.org a reality for you. And I'm looking forward to learning from their expertise on how these cameras work. So Candice and Joe, thanks so much for joining me this afternoon.
Hey.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm doing well. It's great to speak with you again. And I have a ton of questions for you. Many of them are just questions that I'm curious about. I know a lot of these questions the audience is curious about, and we've been kind of corralling a lot of these questions over the summer since the Bearcams went live, and we're going to try to answer as many of those as possible. Before I jump into those, however, I want to make sure that everyone's aware of the Bearcam viewer survey that you can find a link for in the feature comment below the live camera feed. Just scroll down towards the bottom of the page. If you can take that, I would appreciate it. I'm very curious to know more about your Bearcam viewing experience and how it impacts your views on wildlife conservation. And I'm working with several researchers that are looking at at your views on the webcams. So please fill that out if you have the opportunity. To begin, however, I really want to provide the audience with some context of where Brooks River is and in its relation to the rest of the world. And we're going to pull up here a quick video, because along with our webcam partner, the National Park Service, Explore.org hosts and maintains several webcams along Brooks River. Brooks River is located about 300 miles southwest of Anchorage, Alaska, in Katmai National Park. The river is about 1.5 miles long, and the falls is about halfway along the river's length. We host several webcams along the river. The signal from those Bearcams is sent from the river up to not one, but 2 radio repeaters on Dumpling Mountain. And those repeaters relay the signal to the small town of King Salmon, about 30 miles away, where it's sent to the rest of the world. So it's a remote location, off the grid, and getting the signal out from these locations does pose a challenge. And this overlay here represents where our cameras are at Brooks River. So several near the falls and then several at the river mouth itself. In total, you get to see virtually all of the lower half of Brooks River. There's a small smidgen of space downstream of the area that we like to call the cut bank that you can't see from the falls or you can't see from the Riverwatch camera, but that's really maybe only 100 to 200 yards of space that we can't see. So it's a very narrow spot on the river that we can't see. We can see virtually all of the river itself. I want to try to dive, with Candice and Joe, I want to try to dive to the river with you right now and talk about some of the logistics of getting that signal out, and also the hardware that it takes to get the signal out of the Brooks River area. And Joe, first of all, can you tell us a little bit about the cameras that you use at the river? What types of cameras are used for these live cams?
Sure. So basically, we use just high-end and they have pan-tilt zoom capabilities. We use these mostly for their high definition capabilities as well as their low power consumption. These have been, they're outdoor rated, so they work well in this type of environment. And, this is basically what we use on most of our partner sites.
And Candice, what internet speed is required to upload, the footage to the rest of the world. It's probably not something that everyone has available to them at home.
Um, Actually, you'd be surprised. So, per camera, we need between like 2 and 4 megabits a second. Brian, are you getting an echo, or is that just me hearing myself echo? Sorry. So yeah, you need between 2 and 4 megabits a second per camera. We have, I think, 6 or 7 cameras at Brooks Falls. So do the math. We need a lot of bandwidth, somewhere between like 18 to 20 megs, which is what we finally have. We finally managed to upgrade our bandwidth this year, which is really, really good. But to make sure that we are staying under that, you don't experience buffering, dropped frames, all the rest of it, we have to monitor that data really closely. So Joe does it, I do it, Brian does it. He's the one doing all the switching currently. And we also have to limit the number of camera operators that are controlling a cam at a time. Sometimes we'll have to reduce the bandwidth on a specific camera. So we are pretty hands-on, making sure that we stay underneath our 20 meg cap, so that you guys get the best quality possible.
And you were able to upgrade the bandwidth this year, is that correct?
Yeah, we had 17 last year, we have 20 this year, so we were able to up the resolution on some cameras. We're able to allow camera operators to control more cameras, and for Naomi specifically, she's really happy. A lot of people remember that whenever we had to do a live chat at Brooks Falls, we had to turn off one of the cameras, generally the underwater camera, to free up bandwidth. We don't have to do that this year. And Naomi can upload a photo to Facebook without having to shut down all the cameras. It used to be that whatever media ranger was at the park had to wait until after 10 p.m. when the peak action had gone for them to get online and do anything on the cameras, because the moment they signed on, our cameras would die. So we've got a little bit more headroom, better quality of life for Naomi. We don't have to turn off stuff for live chats anymore. So all around, it's been better.
And I do remember when I was a ranger at Brooks River, getting asked quite a bit what I'm doing on the internet. People would be like, the cams are down. What's happening? Are you doing anything? No, it's not me. So sometimes it was, a lot of times it wasn't. But yeah, if I wanted to upload things, it definitely was a late night to try to do that. So I know that the rangers up there are appreciative of those changes. Getting back to some of the technical aspects of the hardware at the river, Joe, can you talk a little bit more about how the cameras are powered? I mentioned before, or I think I wanted to mention at least, that Brooks River is off-grid, so there's no power lines or roads that run to Brooks River. So how is the system being powered?
Well, starting at Dumpling, so those are 100% off-grid power systems. So basically, they're powered by batteries, and then we are relying on the sun energy to recharge those batteries. At the repeater sites, we have small generators that will kick on when there's 2 or 3 days of overcast. And in years past, we did have those wind generators there, and that helped kind of give it another alternative source of charge for the batteries. This year, we weren't able to put new ones in just due to constraints and time and just getting the generators up there. So this year we are 100% reliant on the sun, and then we've got the backup generators. Down at the falls, that is a bit larger solar array. So I think there's 6 solar panels total, and that's it. So it's just sun down at the falls. The fall seems to get a lot better sun than up at Dumpling Mountain most of the time. And then the lower river, so that is all ran off the generator, the diesel generator that's on the Brooks side or on the lodge side of Brooks Camp. So that's basically grid power dependent upon the NPS staff who maintain that generator and everything. As long as that thing's running, lower river will have power. The biggest challenge in all of it is definitely the top of the mountain, just with the drastic conditions and temperature, especially once we start getting into the fall months, the colder temperatures, that's when the challenges really start. Right now, we're kind of coasting with all the sun in Alaska right now. Usually June and July and most of August are pretty problem free. I'm knock on wood. And then September and October are usually the more challenging months.
Yeah, there's a lot of sunlight in Alaska in general right now. The Brooks River is still experiencing something like 19, 20 hours of daylight overall, but come the fall solstice, or excuse me, the fall equinox, it's going to be dwindling very, very quickly. So we always have to keep our fingers crossed that the power system up on Dumpling Mountain stays operational. When there isn't any sunlight available to like the falls system, Joe, how long could the falls cam operate before like that the battery system there drains? Do you have an estimate on that?
Sure. What we do is, I monitor the power very closely, so it's a balancing act. An estimation would be like 7 days total for the falls high camera to stay online, and that's as long as we're turning off, say, the low cam and the riffles, just to put all the power to the falls cam and to the wireless link. But I think 7 days is a pretty good estimate based on the battery bank there. And it would have to be, quite a weather to not get any charge for 7 days would be very unique right now, especially.
And what about weatherproofing the system? Dumpling Mountain is a pretty, it's the difference between the river and the elevation at the river in Dumpling Mountain is fewer than 2,500 feet, but the weather up on Dumpling is very, very different. So how are you making or in trying to ensure that the system lasts the harsh weather that is experienced up on top of the mountain?
Sure. So everything that we use is outdoor rated. So basically, like those black boxes, they're Pelican cases. They're weatherproof. They can survive in a hurricane. Really any penetrations that are coming into that box, the cables and everything is housed inside of some sort of plastic or PVC conduit, and then some sort of a weatherproof connector to kind of cap it off, or silicone of some sort. The most important part of these boxes in particular is closing the lid, once the work is done, and making sure that it's shut. Usually, if there is any sort of water intrusion, it's due to some sort of like the lid wasn't closed tightly or something like that. But as long as those things are closed, then they should be waterproof. And then these boxes sit on top of just an aluminum frame that is sitting on top of the mountain. And that aluminum so far has held up for, I think, 4 or 5 years now at this point. Yeah, that aluminum frame right there. And the guy wires there that you see, that just kind of holds it to once the winds start kicking up there. There's always the chance that thing could just simply blow off the mountain. So those guy wires help it stay in place. So far, so good.
Yeah, that was one of our big fears this year. Was that tower had blown over. We just didn't know. We had to have a ranger walk up and like look at it just to let us know it's still around.
And that has happened before. Not with the Explorer system, but with the National Park Service radio repeater that's up there that basically allows the rangers at Brooks River to talk to the headquarters in King Salmon. That has blown over completely before. So yeah, it is. Yeah. I mean, when you look at those really windy days at the mouth of Brooks River, and there's big 3-foot waves coming off of the lake, it can be blowing 70, 80 miles an hour or more up on the top of Dumpling Mountain. So those things really do have to be secure and weatherproofed well. One of the cameras that's maybe most difficult to weatherproof though is the underwater camera. And this year you weren't actually able to get down into the water and really take a good look at it. And sometimes people have been seeing like some pink flashing on the underwater camera. Is that because it's been under the water for more than a year?
Yeah, basically I can only give you my best guess, but I would say there's some sort of water intrusion into the enclosure, and there's just a little tiny camera sensor in there. Usually the pink flashing is kind of an indication that something is happening, and it could be, slowly dying. The fact that it survived all winter in the water and it still looks relatively really good considering where it's been for so long. I was definitely impressed with the fact that it even came back to life and everything. So
yeah, we had
I think it'll last all year. I think you might start seeing more and more of the pink flashing, but ultimately, we'll swap that camera out with another underwater rated camera.
Yeah, we had fully expected that camera not to come back, and then when it turned on, we were all surprised. Yeah.
And I enjoy watching that camera very much. It offers just a unique perspective on the river. Great looks at the fish, rainbow trout, salmon, and other fish species as well. And of course, the occasional bear swimming by. So it's wonderful to see that perspective on the river. I'm glad that camera survived this year. Of course, like we said, the Brooks Camp is basically off the grid. So any power that's produced there is produced on site. There aren't any power lines that go up to Dumpling Mountain. There are no power lines or fiber optic cable that run to King Salmon. So how are we getting the signal from Brooks River to Dumpling Mountain and then to King Salmon? Can you explain a little bit of that wireless dynamic?
Sure. So we have our internet is landed in King Salmon, and then we have about a 30 mile link to the top of the mountain. So that link is essentially our backhaul link that, as long as that links up, we have internet on top of the mountain. From the mountain, then that's where we use an antenna that's called a sector antenna, and it basically lights up all of Brooks River, the whole entire camp, with the ability to connect something from Brooks up to the mountain. So it's all wireless, point-to-point links, and the most challenging one of those is the 30-mile link. We did upgrade that this year. We actually also moved some equipment in King Salmon for the upgraded internet as well. So we actually did a lot, mostly in King Salmon, that has the result of what we did in King Salmon has improved the overall stability of the entire system. What viewers ultimately will see are less highlights and just kind of less overall glitchiness happening on the cameras. But there's the technician swapping out a radio. That's the big radio that shoots up to Dumpling Mountain. And that is on the NPS radio tower that's right there in King Salmon. And so far, so good.
And this year especially has been a challenging year, really, for all of us, and in so many different ways. So maybe we can talk about, what you would do, both of you would do in a normal year. How would you go for planning for the camera installation at Brooks River in a normal year? And then what additional challenges did you face in this year due to the pandemic?
Sure. Well, in a normal year, basically the first where I start is what broke last year, or how did the system go down last year? This year, for example, the system went down right around the end of October, just all of a sudden, and there was no way of telling why. There was just no way to get up to the mountain at that point. Snow started falling, and it was just, you're going to have to wait until next year to even see what happened. So going kind of blind into a situation like that, I approach it expecting the worst, assuming the worst, that everything kind of the system on top of the mountain blew off the mountain. So then I just start conquering those little items. I asked the Park Service, they did a flyby in a plane, took a picture. So I was like, okay, it's there. That, there's somewhere to start. Ultimately, just kind of running through the different scenarios of what could have possibly have gone wrong, and then addressing them during my planning phase as far as what hardware that I need to get up to Alaska, how is it going to be configured, how am I going to get the hardware from King Salmon up to the mountain, helicopter flights, all the logistics involved, and what kind of support do I need from the Park Service maintenance crew with their boats and planes and helicopters and whatnot. But all of that goes into planning. This year, we not only did we get the system up, but we also discovered why it went down last year, and it was just a failed hardware component on Dumpling Mountain. So it was really not that huge of an issue, but it was kind of impossible to just assume that one piece is what failed, because it could have been one of dozens of items that could possibly have failed. So that was how I began planning this year. We probably start planning this in January is when we start having phone calls and ramping things up. During that time, my plans involved me going up there with a team. In, I'd say, March, that shifted drastically, kind of coming to the realization that I'm not going to be able to go up to Alaska. So, with this year in particular, that was the biggest challenge of not having an Explorer team up there to do this. So I have to find local resources to do it. With the help of our internet service provider, GCI in King Salmon, they provided the local talent, and I was able to, give them very detailed instruction on exactly what to do. I built a lot of hardware here, pre-configured, basically plug and play, just to make it as simple as possible for them and to just allow for as much time as possible to address any issues when it came to the actual field work. So all of that worked, basically. So that was the biggest challenge this year, was doing it all remotely. Communication prior to getting the internet up on top of the mountain, that's a huge challenge with satellite phones that sometimes work, sometimes don't. And then, giving these guys kind of real quick shotgun lessons on exactly what should happen, but if it doesn't, try these things. And then they go. They're hiking up the mountain, or they're on a boat to the camp, hike up the mountain. Hopefully they remember everything, but ultimately they got it done. So, I was very impressed.
Yeah. Joe makes it sound super simple, but there was probably, I don't know, at least 6 full weeks where Joe did nothing but build and configure and talk to National Park and GCI about what resources we actually had. And there'd be days when Joe'd be like, okay, I'm virtually on top of the mountain right now. What am I supposed to be building? And having to do that remotely, to fully remotely build anything and then just hope you did it right by the time they get up there, that they can plug it in, it'll work. It was very, very impressive to see that done this year.
It's almost like a, oh, please go ahead.
Oh, no. No, it's fine.
I was thinking about it and how it's almost like a mini version of what NASA does in a sense. They got to build the rover to send to Mars, and they got to test it out, and then keep your fingers crossed that everything sort of works when it gets there. So it is a very impressive feat for everyone who was involved in that. So and I have to admit I was a little bit worried this year, and we all needed bearcam, I think, this year more than ever. So I think everyone is very, very appreciative of your efforts so far.
Yeah, big shout out to GCI for having people who were capable of doing this in Alaska already, so they didn't have to do the quarantine, and they were really on top of it, which was great. I mean, outside of all that, the last steps to get cameras online really just involves coordinating with Catherine's CamOp team and coordinating with the social team. And we'll start, much like planning for the tech side of it, we'll start planning that in January. We'll also have to connect with National Park and the Conservancy in January, February to start planning for promotion, any known park policy changes we need to address, anything like that. We also have to start planning for that side of it in January, February as well. So we're basically talking to Katmai about either turning up or turning down the system all year.
And it's working with the federal government, especially the National Park Service. It's a little bit different than working with like a private partner who may be able to put a camera up in a private like nature sanctuary or something like that. They may have their own specific rules, but there's a lot of considerations with doing this sort of work in national parks. So there's that extra layer to make sure that all of our T's are crossed and I's are dotted.
Yep.
So it's a lot of work behind the scenes to get this ready. Most of the time I'm just kind of sort of sitting back in the spring, sort of like twiddling my thumbs and waiting. And now it's the really busy season for me. It's also still very busy for Candice and Joe, so it doesn't really slow down for them ever. But I get a little bit of a break when the cameras aren't online. But they're working extremely hard year round.
Yeah.
Candice, we talked, you mentioned just now, a little bit of those extra considerations that you need to think about before you push the cameras live for the public. Right this year, there's some other things that are going on behind the scenes. You're trying to manage like the quality of the views, and just the overall ability of the cameras themselves to take in the scene. Sometimes the camera view, like at the falls, can look a little pixelated, and we've received a lot of questions this year about image quality. So can you talk about what might affect image quality with the bear cams on the river?
A lot of things. So I'd like to first talk about the difference between resolution and image quality. Some people use those two things as basically the same thing, right? But a resolution is really just a measure of how many pixels are in your image, 1920 by 1080, or like 4,000, right? So you can have an image with that many pixels that doesn't have great image quality. Image quality is a measure of a lot of things, right? So it is your resolution, but it's also your bandwidth. It's about how much light the camera's getting. It's about how sensitive the image sensor is. It's about how old the camera is. How well is it starting to fail to cope with low light scenarios? So all of those things come together. And then on top of that, YouTube, due to COVID and just the increased use of internet all around the world, has started to default, when you open the page, it'll default it to 720 or lower. So that you need to go on that like bottom control bar. You need to click, oh goodness, there's too much noises on my, sorry. You'll need to click that little settings wheel and then move it back to HD, right? Because a lot of people don't realize that like when you first open it, YouTube's gonna automatically default lower, and Netflix has done the same thing just because of the amount of internet that's being taken up around the world. ISPs just haven't been able to cope. So one, make sure your YouTube setting is set to HD, but also you'll notice in the morning when there's that high contrast, there's lots of pixelation. If it's really dark, you'll see pixelation. If we've had to reduce the bandwidth for some reason, maybe something's not obeying the rules we set, or Naomi has to go upload a lot of photos or whatever it is, you'll start to see a little bit more pixelation. And then at some level, right, this Falls camera is old. Like I don't think it's been touched since 2016. It was out in the winter, just all winter, wasn't winterized this year. None of those cameras were winterized this year. So it's starting to not perform as well as it used to. And then there are other better cameras in our system, so you can see the difference, right? And yeah, one of the other disappointments of COVID this year was like we had upgrades planned for different cameras, including Brooks Falls, and we just couldn't do it. The camera we want is still in China. So what are you gonna do? Like it just didn't get delivered. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into what the image quality is. Resolution is just one of the factors.
One of the other considerations, of course, is trying to bring audio out of the system. We have a microphone at the falls. We have a microphone at the riffles. We don't have I don't actually know if there's a microphone now at the lower river. There used to be. I'm not sure if we put one in there last year, but if there is, there's no sound down there. So what were you thinking, or what are we thinking about when we're considering adding like a microphone to many of these cameras, especially those at the lower river?
Yeah, this isn't lower river specific. There's a number of cameras in our system that could support audio but don't. There are actually mics there, but those are turned off at the request of the National Park Service. for privacy reasons. People stand on that bridge, and if they don't know that there's audio being recorded there, right, it's just, we can't like ethically be broadcasting people's conversations to the world. So they asked us to turn it off. When there was limited viewership at the park, I asked them like, hey, can we turn it on until the park opens? And she's like, let's just not bother. It's gonna have to come off again, like, and it needs to be off. This is also true for like Waimea. We get questions all the time. Why isn't there audio on Waimea? It's because that's on a lifeguard tower. You can hear lifeguard conversations. You can hear people on the beach having conversations. So a lot of our cameras, there's just no audio because they're in public places, and we don't want to be broadcasting private conversations. And also, like, even if we like legally could, you know, do you want people walking by and like cussing up a storm? Like, this is family friendly, right? We try to only have audio when we know we can control what that audio is going to be.
And the mouth of Brooks River isn't necessarily a quiet place, I should say, either. When people are visiting, yeah, besides the conversations that you might hear, a lot of airplanes. Not so much this year, just due to the fact that there aren't a lot of people visiting Brooks River. But last year, yeah, it's just like a constant, it's like an airport, basically a mini airport there. So it can be very quiet and very peaceful at times, but during the middle of the day, especially, it is a very noisy place overall. So yeah, a lot of considerations to keep in mind when we're thinking about audio and where to put video. Who operates the cameras though, Candice? You know, we see the cameras moving around a lot. Occasionally, you know, people might wonder if there's some sort of AI involved that allows us to follow the cameras, but it's still all human powered right now. So who's operating the cameras?
Yeah, so there's 2, potentially future 3 ways that we control cameras. First and foremost, we have our volunteer camera operators who are led by Catherine, their fearless leader. She's great. And then all the camera operators are fantastic. They do a lot of training, especially on bearcam. Our bearcam cam ops are like really like are the most experienced ops that we have. And so they're going around and like manually following the bears and showing you what's up. Some cameras we have on an auto tour. So we'll have it like if a camera operator doesn't move it in 10 minutes or something, they'll just start to pan around on its own. That's like Mount Diablo, right? We don't have a camera operator on that camera. It just moves around. And then there is one camera on our system that is operated by AI, and that's one of the Churchill cameras. And they have a radar that will like sense polar bears out, and then it'll automatically zoom on them, which is like the most cutting edge and might be a way to get more curated experiences on those cameras that we just can't have an operator on all the time. But for the bear cams, we've got a person monitoring them almost all the time to help give us the best experience.
And I know you don't necessarily want to talk too much about, you know, what their interface looks like, but can you give us a little bit of an idea of what the camera operators use to control the cameras? Like when they're looking at a screen, what do they see?
So we developed our own camera control system. Every single camera that we use different models. You can log into the device and they've all got their own different UI, but logging into the device also takes up bandwidth, and we always are trying to reduce the bandwidth load on the network. So we've got a separate camera control system that we can control the amount of data it's using, and it's the same look across all of our cameras, so the controls will be uniform. They don't have to like go around and learn 4 different user interfaces for each different camera model. And essentially it's just a lower resolution of what the camera's actually seeing. With the little pan tilt zoom, that you can't see me there, right? A little box, little joystick box, and the little zoom thing. So basically they can pan tilt and they can zoom, and they can just monitor what's happening pretty much immediately right there. We've also got several presets loaded in. So those are like automatic. If you press a button, it's going to automatically go to this location. And the admin cam ops will spend a lot of time mapping those presets, because there's some cameras can have like 20 different presets, and they have to manually add each different one preset, which is a lot for them. So good job, guys, for 170 some odd cameras. Yeah, so that's basically it. It's a uniform UI that shows you the camera and has a virtual joystick and a virtual zoom bar, and then they can control it. It's become more intuitive over the last year and a half. We've done a lot of work on it. Yeah.
And if anyone's interested in becoming a volunteer camera operator for explore.org, you can inquire by writing to volunteer at explore.org. So, and let us know what cameras you're interested in. There's a few follow-up questions that will be asked, like how much time you can commit, and some questions about internet speed, things of that nature. But yeah, please, write to that email address, volunteer@explore.org, if you are interested. We're always recruiting new camera operators. One camera that's really popular, Joe and Candice, is the Dumpling Cam. And that's one that we have, available most summers at streaming live from Katmai National Park, looking across the broad wilderness of the park itself. But we don't have that available this year. So why not? Why not Dumpling? That's a question that's been asked a lot this year.
Where's Dumpling?
Sure.
Yeah. Joe, you want to take this one?
Sure. Well, it's there still, and it does work. But the main reason is because we weren't able to install the wind generators. I just basically prioritize the lower river and falls cameras and conserve all the power just simply to relay the internet down to Brooks camp. That camera just simply adds a load to the Dumpling temp repeater. This year, the batteries that are in there are the same ones that were used the last 2 years. At the Dumpling repeater site, they are brand new batteries. So for me, I don't want to take the risk of losing internet to all the cameras over that one single camera. In reality, it would probably be okay to turn on every now and then, but it's just a lot less riskier to just keep it off for this year. And next year, or whenever we can get up there again and swap those batteries out with brand new ones, then it would be just fine. And also put a wind generator in. So basically it's about power management is the main reason. And, just ensuring that the Falls has the best possible setup to keep that camera online for as long as possible.
Yeah. And a fringe
So
benefit of having Dumpling off is that we can have a higher resolution on some of the other cameras, like the lower river cameras. So if we turned that on, we'd have to readjust bandwidth. So it's a power consideration, and then we get better internet on the other cameras.
Something that often interferes with, the clarity of the views is just that sometimes the camera housing gets dirty. And a lot of times people are wondering, why don't you clean the cameras more often? So that's something that, we don't really have any control over. We have to be physically at the river to do it most often. But some of the cameras, so you might just have to wipe it off. Like we might just have to get rangers to clean the underwater camera, for instance. But some of the cameras still have an ability for self-cleaning. Is that right?
I don't know Joe, I don't think we have the self-cleaning enclosure on the lower river anymore, do we? I could be wrong.
Not on lower river, no.
Okay.
Riffles and Falls High.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other, Mike, you can also speak to this, that some locations, Falls Low in particular, you see that's kind of dirty right now, and also the underwater cam, that involves a ranger, and like the Falls Low cam, to clean that, like it has to be clear of bears, and you need the person cleaning it, and you need somebody to watch around for bears. Like it's a whole bear thing just to even get the cameras cleaned in some of those locations.
Yeah, for the underwater camera, you have to get into the water to do it. And the water can be quite deep near the camera itself. When I walked into there and I took this picture last July around this time, to get in there, I was up to my shoulders in water. The weather was quite warm, so it wasn't unpleasant. But when the weather's cold, you want to consider putting on a wetsuit or a dry suit to do it. You have to look for bears in the vicinity and make sure that none are approaching the vicinity. So you need lookouts for you. So there's a whole bunch of considerations into cleaning that camera. And then a lot of them are just kind of hard to get to. And it's not really legal to get to the Falls Low cam right now, because that area below the platform where that camera is attached is off limits to people between June 15 and August 15. So even if there weren't any bears around, that's kind of like a people-free zone at the moment in the immediate vicinity of the falls.
And then,
the domes
also just get scratched, right? The domes have been out all winter in an Alaskan winter, and they're out year after year after year, and they just get scratched, and there's like a film on the dome that starts to like peel and degrade, which is some of what you're seeing on the Falls High camera, which is like when the light's right at it, you can definitely see the age of the dome there. Again, things we wanted to upgrade or replace this year that we just couldn't do it because of COVID.
And in general, how long can we expect the cams to stay live this year? Like, for example, in the lower river cameras, I think you may have touched on this earlier, Joe, but how long, can we expect those to stay on? And then, if we manage our power really well, what about some of those others that are off the grid? How long could we potentially keep those up if nothing else breaks?
Well, for lower river, that's pretty simple. It's just as long as that generator is running on the lodge side of the camp. For falls, that will run as long as there is sunlight that's recharging the batteries, and that goes for Dumpling as well. I think last year, if the one failure that happened at the end of October would not have happened, I think we would have seen it go well into November, if not further. So my expectation this year is into November for falls. As long as all the systems stay the way they are right now, and it's just a matter of powering, I could see that being very possible. It's weather dependent, so it also just depends on how is the weather out there. But this year, that's kind of what my expectation is to see it run into November.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, let's hope that's the case. Let's hope for some breaks in the clouds this October and November for sure. And one final question for you both. I'd like you to do a little bit of dreaming for a moment. If you could add anything to the bear cams to improve the experience, what would you add and why would you add it?
Oh, easy. I want that 4K cam for Brooks Falls. So much. We were so close, guys. Yeah, that would be, it's the same camera that they use on the Great Spirit Bluff Cliff Cam, and we'd be streaming it the same way that Raptor Resource streams there. So you get that 4K camera compressed down to 1080, so you get that like really nice rich pixel depth. Oh, the zoom, it would be so beautiful next year. Fingers crossed. Hope we can. That's the dream.
I'd say a power run from King Salmon up to Dumpling Mountain. That would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Or more underwater cameras would be my vote for sure. We have several spots now on the pilings on the bridge, and I think it would be pretty cool to have several options for the underwater, just to see where the fish are. You can just go to where the fish are.
We could drop something down from the center of that bridge and do a 360 underwater camera. That would be cool. So they could just like pan around on their own. Yeah, that'd be really nifty.
Yeah, a lot of things to dream about. Slowly but surely. I think we'll get to those some of those things eventually to improve the bearcam viewing experience. And I know the webcam team at explore.org. We haven't talked about much. Mentioned them much today, but there's a bunch of people working behind the website to make that a great experience. Candice, do you want to mention some of the staff that you work with?
Yeah, okay, so first we got Brian, who's been doing all the wonderful switching here. And he also, so me and Brian work together for all the live chats, so he'll generally like input all the media, and then I'll start to do the switching for Mike and whoever he's talking to. We've got Dan, who's our director of engineering, and he's the one who all of your website complaints end up going to. He's also the one who gets to talk to Discuss every time Discuss goes down, so everybody send all of your prayers to Dan every time Discuss has issues. All of your good vibes to him, because he's always the one like trying to push those outages along with Courtney, who's also helping with that. And then Zach, who has came on last year and has done so much to make the camera control application really a thing that adds value to the viewers' lives and the camera operators' lives. He's also done some really good stuff that allow us to like edit more quickly, so I can put out stuff to YouTube sort of same day. Charlie, everybody can download stuff like same day onto their phone. He's done some really, really good things on the camera control application. And then we've obviously got Catherine, who I mentioned earlier, and she helps manage all of our camera operators. And then her whole admin team, they've been great. It takes a village really to manage all of those. And then all of our moderators too, especially we have a whole group of new YouTube moderators who are fearless, and our website moderators who are like always providing good information. They're like always talking to, and they're saints, especially when stuff goes wrong that they don't know the answer to, or have to go look up, or have to go bother myself or Courtney about some stuff. So yeah, it really is a lot. Am I missing anybody? I feel like I am. No? Well then there's Liz, who also manages make sure everybody gets paid on time. All the contracts are signed, all the business stuff as well. Make sure we have live cam agreements and bills are being paid. Yeah, so Liz I always be on Liz's good side. It's a good rule of thumb. Yeah.
Yeah, many unsung heroes working for the organization. So I'm glad to be part of the team. You know, I often in the face of it online, but there's so many people working behind the scenes to make sure that you can talk to me and I can talk to the audience. So I'm very thankful for all of those folks and their help and hard work. One of the improvements that we made this year to the website was just a message partner button. You can find that really right above the comments on explore.org. So that's a great way to get in touch with the partner if you have a specific question for them. Just keep in mind that it's not for technical issues. So if you are curious about that, you know, hey, the website's down, or I'm having trouble loading the feed, or whatever it is, don't send that to the partner. You can write to feedback@explore.org with any website issues. But that partner button's a great new feature if you have questions for like the ranger staff at Katmai National Park, for instance. But Candice, Joe, great conversation. Really glad that you were able to join me today and talk the tech of the bear cams. I certainly learned some more stuff about how difficult of a task it is to get these cameras up and running.
Thank you for having us.
Sure thing. My pleasure, Mike.
Yeah, thanks again. And I want to, announce, I have a big announcement really at the end of our chat today. Some of you may have been watching this whole entire time, waiting for me to get to this point. So I appreciate your patience. And this, I want to announce our snapshot contest winners. There is a snapshot feature that when you're watching the webcams on explore.org that you can use. And it's a great way to share your experience with other people. So what we asked everyone to do in the audience is favorite some of those snapshots, and those go to a separate web page which everyone can view. But the staff from explore.org went through those favorites that were selected by the audience, and we picked out some of our favorites. And I'd like to announce the winners. The winners will get a custom-made mug with an image, a cartoon image of one of the Brooks River bears on it. So the first one that we have up that I want to announce comes from Eric 28, and this is an image of Lefty napping upstream of the falls. So with a belly full of salmon, undoubtedly. The next one comes from Shell with one L. This wolf that we've been enjoying over the past 2.5 weeks or so, fishing at Brooks Falls. Great, crisp, clear image of that wolf. And then Allie Gator has a beautiful sunrise image over the mouth of Brooks Falls. Evie Wada took this fantastic picture of number 803 and her 2 surviving cubs. She recently lost a cub, so a sad event for her, but she's persevering to help raise her 2 additional offspring. Springer Mom brought us this view of a rainbow trout on the underwater camera, so a fantastic look at one of Katmai's iconic fish species. LLI brought us this photo of 708 Amelia and her yearlings. So just an adorable picture of a bear family there. Carol Bear brought us this close-up of a subadult bear enjoying its fish in the lower Brooks River. So a lot of bears fishing successfully near the mouth of the river right now. So tons of bear activity on the lower river. Check out those cams if you haven't yet. Bears 6-1 took this great image of 719 and her yearlings on a road from the lower river camera. She has some pretty tubby looking cubs at this time of the year. And Barbara Horan took this great photo of a cub sitting in the grass. Just an adorable, small, cute bear there. So thanks to everybody who participated in the contest. Keep taking your snapshots. We look through those. It's a great way to share your experience with the audience overall. Explore.org will contact the winners through the email or social media account that's linked to your profile. So make sure that's up to date. And if you don't hear anything within a week or so, you can always write to feedback@explore.org and inquire about that. Our next live event will be tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific, when I host a live play-by-play talking about bears and salmon in Brooks River with you. So stay tuned at that time on this live chat channel, and I'll be broadcasting, talking about the bears and salmon live. We never know what we're going to see. It's always an exciting time and fun time. So I hope that you'll join me then. Again, my name is Mike Fitz with Explore.org. Thanks for watching, and never stop learning.